Hi, let's talk about crypto gaming. We are looking at Enjin Coin, ticker symbol ENJ, currently at $1.93, market rank 70 with a market cap of approximately 1.7 billion. Now we will not go into the fundamentals of the project at all, but what we will do is we will look at the charts and we will compare Enjin Coin to other gaming cryptos, for example Axie Infinity and Decentraland. How is Enjin Coin's relative performance to those two competing projects with higher market caps? And so what we will do is we will not just look at the Enjin Coin US dollar chart, obviously we will also look at Enjin Coin valued in Bitcoin. And something that I personally like to do is looking at the altcoin price in Ethereum. That's this chart over here. So that's Enjin Coin's price divided by the Ethereum price. And so when we look at Axie Infinity, that's this chart over here, right? Where we got this incredible rally recently. I don't know how many X rally that is, 367X. We will compare this chart now with Enjin. So this is now the Enjin Coin price divided by a competitor, by Axie Infinity, or Enjin Coin measured in Axie Infinity. So you can see Enjin Coin is underperforming. And then we will also look at Mana, right? Decentraland, the second place in the gaming space. That's the Mana US dollar chart. And this is the Enjin Coin price divided by the Mana price. So quite a few interesting things to look at. So first of all, the US dollar chart, right? This is quite interesting. We did see a big pump during the very first altcoin rally. This was the ICO boom. And then when the crash happened, the crypto winter happened in 2018, we went down more than 95% in Enjin Coin. And this is relatively typical for altcoins. Here, let's look again at the long-term Bitcoin chart. This was the first really mainstream bubble where Bitcoin got a lot of media attention. It burst at the end of 2017, and then we got the crash in Bitcoin, right? In Bitcoin, we lost more than 80%, and there was a relatively modest crash because even projects such as Cardano that are now hyped to almost hit $3, even those projects, they lost 97% in this bear market. So it's really not nice to be in any altcoin during a bear market. You're gonna lose basically all of your money. 95% loss, that's basically everything, right? But then on the other hand, when we come out of such a large crash, so this is again Enjin Coin, if we come out of it and then you buy during the largest depression, that's where you get the big gains, right? The 87x gains that we now saw in Enjin Coin. Now let's look at Enjin Coin valued in Bitcoin. It's interesting that there seems to be some kind of trading range here, right? We seem to have some kind of floor, we seem to have some kind of resistance levels, and Enjin Coin is kind of moving back and forth between these levels. Currently we are rather at the higher end of the spectrum. We can also see that since the beginning of the year, Enjin Coin outperformed quite a bit, a 9x, and that's because all altcoins, they started to pump since the beginning of the year. Bitcoin dominance, it started to fall since the beginning of the year. More than 70% of crypto was in Bitcoin at the beginning of the year. Now only 44% of crypto is Bitcoin. So the altcoins, they gained ground since the beginning of the year. And Enjin Coin is no exception. Enjin Coin outperformed Bitcoin massively, and that's very positive, right? You take on more risk with a smaller altcoin such as Enjin Coin, and so you do get compensated when times are good. Now let's look at Enjin Coin to Ethereum. And I think that's actually the real chart to look at, because what's the common way to do things in crypto is you buy your stack of Bitcoin, right? Your long-term holdings, you dollar cost average into the market, you just hold Bitcoin as a diversifier to say your stock holdings, to your property maybe, to kind of cancel out the volatilities between the assets, right? So you buy and hold Bitcoin for the long term. Now Ethereum is traded more actively. There are a lot more transactions on the Ethereum blockchain. And so you've got more speculative money within Ethereum. And so Ethereum and altcoins, they are used more actively. And if you move from Ethereum to an altcoin, you expect outperformance versus Ethereum, right? Otherwise, you could simply stick to the safe Ethereum. But you go further up the risk curve in order to outperform Ethereum. And so if you measure now the outperformance to Ethereum since the beginning of the year, we still see quite quite a nice run, 350%. If you look at the longer term outperformance, we're looking at 900% roughly. And so you could argue as well that this is a trading range somewhat, but you could also argue that we are in a long-term outperforming trend, obviously with a lot of volatility. So timing this does make a lot of sense. You don't want to be in for like a 70% drop or for even a 90% drop versus Ethereum. So these charts, they do matter, and currently we are probably not that cheap versus Ethereum, right? I'm not saying that we will come back down to those levels, but a drop versus Ethereum of like 30% or so wouldn't be out of the regular movements at all, right? These are the kind of movements that we see all the time in relative performance between altcoins. So just be aware of this. If you're getting in right now, you might not be buying at the very perfect time, but you're also obviously not buying at the top. Now, Axie Infinity is where all the hype is currently happening, right? And that's obviously because there's a lot of players, mainly from the Philippines, that earn their money with the game. And so adoption is increasing, the price is exploding. And so when you compare this now to Enjin Coin, so the Enjin Coin divided by Axie Infinity, there's obviously not a lot of chance, right? If you look at any altcoin divided by Axie Infinity, you'll probably see this kind of drop everywhere, simply because the outperformance of Axie Infinity is so dramatic. So if we just look at this, relatively speaking, Enjin Coin lost against Axie Infinity by 97%, but that's not something that is Enjin Coin related really. But still, we have to compare those two because Axie Infinity is larger in market cap. It's almost 3 times as large as Enjin Coin. But it's also interesting when you just look at the circulating supply, Enjin Coin is probably not going to inflate as much as Axie Infinity in the future. So who knows if this outperformance is really going to last. You have to look at more than just charts in order to make such a judgment call. You gotta look at the projects themselves and figure out how adoption will influence the prices. Now Mana went also up, right? All of crypto gaming is currently doing quite well. The US dollar chart since the beginning here, November 2017, went up by 62x. And now let's look at Enjin versus Mana. And here we've got something that is way more comparable, right? This looks pretty straightforward. But again, the trading ranges, they are large. 150% potential gain, 80% potential losses. And we are not particularly cheap on Enjin Coin right now. We're slightly above the middle of that trading range. So you can also plot this chart the exact other way around, right? This is now the Mana price divided by the Enjin price. So how expensive is Mana? And if you look at this, this looks quite interesting, right? The market caps are very close to each other, but if you just look at historical price movements, Mana seems to have more upside potential, right? And what I also like about this chart is that these ranges, they seem to be relatively stable. So it's not like Mana was underperforming Enjin Coin consistently. It's really that there's just a lot of volatility, a lot of trading happening. And so if I was to decide now between Mana and Enjin Coin, simply based on the charts, I would probably rather go with Mana. Because the risks, they seem to be similar, but the relative valuation now seems to slightly favor Decentraland. So take it for what it is, right? Nobody knows if these kind of patterns, they are sustainable. But since we are not discussing the fundamentals of any project on this channel, we are only looking at numbers, at data, at charts. This is what we can see. And so if you are deciding, should you rather buy this, that this will continue to go up, or would you rather buy this, that this would go up? I kind of prefer this chart. This seems to be a little bit better in risk versus reward than when you look at Enjin Coin in risk versus reward. If you enjoyed this video, please give this a like. YouTube will then help to grow the channel. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe as well. I publish videos every single day. And since those videos, they are time sensitive and they outdate relatively quickly, you might as well hit the notification bell to get the videos while they are fresh. Last but not least, we've got a Telegram channel. We are approximately 400 people over there. You can find us by either clicking the link in the video description or by searching for Bitcoin Strategy Channel within the Telegram app. Would be great to see you there as well. See you next time. Bye bye.